This is the 12 News Legal Deep Dive, where we take a look at some of the biggest legal cases making headlines in Arizona and across the country. A shooting on I-10. The driver claims self-defense. What does Arizona law say? A DCS worker attacked on Facebook Live. Now there's legal action against the department, but it's not from the worker being attacked. TikTok ban. What could the Supreme Court rule? And as the Los Angeles area wildfires continue to rage, the first lawsuits from residents who they're blaming for part of the destruction.
A deadly shooting on Interstate 10 prompted an 8-hour closure of the freeway's westbound lanes on Wednesday. Phoenix police say an altercation happened between two men driving in separate cars. One man shot at the other, who then crashed his car into the center median and died. The shooter exited the freeway at 75th Avenue and immediately called 911.
We specialize in self-defense cases, and I see these types of road rage cases all the time.
Andrew Marcantel, a supervising partner at Attorneys for Freedom law firm, tells me Arizona allows a person to defend themselves in situations like this, but there are some caveats.
In order to use a firearm in self-defense, you have to be facing an imminent risk of deadly physical force or serious bodily injury. And the amount of force that you use always has to be proportionate to the force that you are facing.
Marcantel says an imminent threat of deadly physical force can mean someone pointing a gun at you or someone using their car to actively try and run you off the road.
Arizona law doesn't require you to wait until somebody else actually shoots you or shoots at you in order to respond with deadly physical force.
The fact that the shooting happened on a freeway during morning rush hour also factors in.
While you are allowed to use deadly physical force to defend yourself against deadly physical force, what you aren't allowed to do is recklessly or negligently injure or endanger other drivers on the road.
Police say no one else was injured in this incident. Marcantel tells me shootings like this can be entirely avoidable and encourages people to remove themselves from escalating road rage situations.
Your pride is not worth your life. So if you find yourself in this type of a situation, take a deep breath, get yourself out of this situation if you can, change lanes, exit the freeway, go to a different area.
Let's take a legal deep dive into this case. Joining me now is criminal defense attorney Hector Diaz of Diaz Law. Hector, we hear a lot about these self-defense cases, and really, we've learned that it's not one size fits all. A lot of times there are a lot of factors, and each case is so different. I mean, you just can't claim self-defense in every case when you're trying to protect yourself.
Right. They usually start he said, she said.
Right.
And then, law enforcement will come in. There are a lot of things they look at. They start with the forensics, right? They start with witness statements. They want to know, are there any cameras that captured what occurred? Here on the I-10, people see this, or maybe they don't see. There are cameras everywhere.
Yeah, ADA cameras everywhere, yes.
Absolutely. And they're going to be looking and trying to piece together what happened. Is self-defense, first they want to know, okay, what exactly happened? Was it road rage? Then if there is a self-defense assertion, it sounds like this individual may have submitted some kind of interview, they're going to determine whether or not it was reasonable or not. We heard the lawyer here talking earlier, and he's correct. I mean, it has to be immediately necessary that you used deadly force to essentially combat or defend yourself against the same level of force. And these officers are very versed. I mean, they know exactly the statute. They know the kind of facts that will support that, right? Did this person who's the suspect shooter, did he actually see a gun? Did he see a gun, or did he see somebody motion as if they had a gun? I mean, there are a lot of facts that they're going to unpack, and some of the things that they're going to look at. Did let's say the alleged victim now, did he have a gun in the car?
Right.
Look at those issues.
So what would be an example of, someone who claims self-defense when really that's not valid?
Right. So not giving legal advice. Every situation is different,
Sure.
of course. But, the kind of situation where you see somebody that pulls out a handgun, where it is clear they are going to use it against you, and you've got to take the immediate action because it is immediately necessary to defend yourself. Those are the kind of common situations. Somebody pulls out a knife. In that situation, you can assume that your life is being threatened, right? The situation that might not be valid is, and you see this a lot, you see a lot in the courts where somebody says something, says a name, calls you some kind of derogatory name, and somebody takes a gun out and shoots that person. That is not, clearly
okay. That's not self-defense. Okay, I see now. And the fact that this took place on a busy freeway, what kind of legal considerations are we talking about?
I mean, this is inherently dangerous, right? So they're going to be looking additionally, let's say self-defense isn't a viable defense. They're going to be looking at other factors in terms of endangerment, felony endangerment, firing a gun in city limits. I mean, there are other felonies that law enforcement, in this case, I imagine it's the Department of Public Safety that's reviewing this and taking the lead in terms of this investigation. And I mean, if this person was not justified in his actions, they are looking at some really serious charges.
And a big national case affecting millions, the U.S. ban on TikTok. In 3 days, TikTok plans to shut down its app nationwide unless the U.S. Supreme Court intervenes. So, how did we get here? Let's go back to 2020 when then President Donald Trump denounced TikTok as a threat to America's national security. Fast forward to April 2024, a law passed with bipartisan support and signed by President Biden called for TikTok's parent company ByteDance to sell by January 19th, 2025, which is this Sunday, or face a ban in the U.S. because of its risk to national security and free speech. Then, in December, Trump's legal team filed a brief asking for a postponement to allow his incoming administration to address the national security concerns through political negotiations rather than an outright ban. And then just last Friday, federal lawmakers argued before the U.S. Supreme Court that the ban was necessary to safeguard sensitive data. Now, on the flip side, all along, TikTok's legal team has argued it violates First Amendment rights and it fails to provide sufficient evidence. So criminal defense attorney Hector Diaz of Diaz Law is here. Hector, what do you think will happen? I mean, will the U.S. Supreme Court actually make a decision before Sunday, or will TikTok go dark?
I don't see the Supreme Court issuing a ruling before Sunday, and I also don't think it's going to go dark.
Oh.
I think what the Supreme Court could do, there's a little bit of a wrinkle. The Supreme Court could issue what's called a temporary injunction saying, we're still going through our kind of decision process here. We want to review some things. In the interim, we're going to issue a temporary injunction. We're going to hold off on the enforceability of the ban. That could happen.
Okay.
Still unlikely.
Yeah.
I had a chance to kind of review some of the arguments, and the Supreme Court really didn't take a lot of credit into the idea of this First Amendment. They really emphasized that this was a viable national security issue.
Okay.
So, there are some things that I think TikTok, if I was representing TikTok.
Right. You're general counsel.
I'm general counsel. One of the things I'm going to really impress on TikTok right now is let's just lay low for the time being, right? We have a new administration that comes in on Monday.
Right. The day after the ban. Yeah.
We're not going to push out any updates on our app. We're not going to any kind of bug fixes. We're going to lay low. We're not going to do anything.
Okay.
And so, and the hope is that, and I'm assuming there have been some behind-the-scene communications with TikTok officials and the incoming Department of Justice administration, and they're talking about, are you guys going to enforce this if we, if we're there?
Right.
We're not going to go dark completely, but if we're there,
Yeah.
all right, what's going to happen? And I think they've probably been given some assurances by the Department of Justice, the incoming Department of Justice, that they will give some kind of period to see if we can negotiate a sale.
A compromise or something like that,
right.
yeah.
I think Trump, ultimately, I mean, he's said certain things in terms of, favoring TikTok and gave it a bit of kudos. But I think in the end, he understands that this is likely to be sold. That's probably the push here, to be sold to an American company that can run it without that parent Chinese company connection.
Yeah, that national security risk.
Absolutely. And I mean, can we all say Elon? This is,
yeah.
This seems like it makes sense.
There's rumors, right. So this is interesting. I mean, obviously, besides upsetting the 170 million users of TikTok, what kind of legal ramifications do you think that this will have?
There might be those influencers, right, that are really dependent on TikTok. I know, my wife is a huge TikTok fan.
Oh, okay.
All the time. And there's, this algorithm that is amazing that just really sets the bar in terms of this, of really showing you what you're interested in, et cetera, et cetera. But I could see a situation here where ultimately, it's there are going to be these lawsuits, but at the end of the day, I don't think they go anywhere.
Right.
I think, you're going to have the Meta and the Instagrams that are going to sit there and just wait for more users to come along.
Yeah, they're kind of salivating, like
Right.
come to us, right? Speaking of which, there's a lot of people who are flooding what's called Red Note. That's apparently China's version of TikTok. So do you think that could possibly be a next banned target?
and I'm still here thinking Facebook is cool. So
Me too.
This is the first time hearing of Red Note. I did look into it. In fact, they have the same parent Chinese connection.
Right.
Would face the same issue if the ban's enforced.
Okay, all right. So let's take a legal deep dive into the California wildfires. At least 5 lawsuits were filed on Monday in the Eaton fire. Homeowners and renters who lost their homes are suing Southern California Edison, alleging the electric company failed to de-energize all of its electrical equipment despite red flag warnings by the National Weather Service. And then from the Palisades fire, a group of residents and businesses from Pacific Palisades filed a lawsuit against the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, alleging that the city and the agency were unprepared for that fire. So Hector joins us once again. Hector, do these residents really stand a chance? I mean, it almost sounds like a case of David and Goliath.
Yeah, it can be. There's no question that the power company here is going to, if not already, getting their legal teams together in terms of the issues, looking at the evidence. California passed a law recently that doesn't require the homeowner or those that were injured to show negligence on behalf of a company like California Edison. They only have to show that they were the cause of the fire.
Okay.
So it makes it a lot easier.
Right.
That's not lost on California Edison. No doubt California Edison is looking at this issue of whether or not the fire was started by bad actors. Were there, was this arson?
Was it intentionally set?
Right.
Yeah.
And they are undoubtedly spending a lot of time in terms of looking at those issues. Yes, David and Goliath, yes, it could be. But it's also not lost on the lawyers that are representing some of these homeowners that California Edison has had a lot of problems previously in terms of their, some of their reputation amongst the, the various communities there in California. And so, the right jury, this is going to be a process, so it's not going to be overnight. I think that
probably drawn out.
Absolutely, and some of these homeowners are, we just heard in the earlier, they're reporting that they're without homes right now.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be this kind of pressure in terms of whether they, if there is an early settlement, do we accept it? Do we, what do we do? These are class actions that are going to be put together, which means the entirety of the class has to agree to the settlement.
Yeah.
That doesn't always happen. That's not an easy process.
Well, see, and that's the thing, in times like this, and we see it from coast to coast, right? The damages, they are catastrophic. The emotions are high. You can't blame all these residents, these thousands of residents, for being mad. They lost everything. So obviously they want accountability. So, but then on the flip side, I mean, what would lawyers for these big corporations argue? I mean, what's their stand?
They're going to be methodical in terms of reviewing everything and looking at the cause. It's going to come down to whether or not there is a viable piece of evidence, or is there, that connects California Edison to this fire, and that's going to drag out. It's going to really, and they undoubtedly are going to want to settle some of this, right? Because of the public opinion that's out there, and they have to recognize there are a lot of homeowners that are without homes right now.
So maybe end result will be a settlement.
Settlements.
Most likely. Okay, settlements. All right. Okay, so let's get to our last case. Now, you may remember this shocking video here of a man attacking a caseworker from the Department of Child Safety and streamed the entire thing on Facebook Live. It happened back in November. Officials say that the suspect, DeAndre Johnson, had an open case involving his kids. Well, now a woman who witnessed this attack and was in the building at the time, who called 911, has filed a notice of claim against the state of Arizona. She says the emotional and mental injuries have affected her to the point where she hasn't been able to return to work in that same building. Now, the woman's attorney, we should mention, is also a licensed social worker and previously worked for DCS. Hector, when we heard this, a lot of us thought that's pretty ironic that the man who was assaulted in this case wasn't the one who filed the lawsuit. It was the woman who saw it and called 911.
Right. I had to do a double take.
Yeah.
When I read this. And just to clarify, what the lawyer has submitted is what's called a notice of claim.
Yes. What exactly is that?
If you're going to sue a state agency, you have to first give them notice of your intention to file a lawsuit, and that there is a specific amount of money that if they pay the aggrieved party, that lawsuit won't be filed. So it's a letter, nothing more than a letter. It has to be filed within 6 months from the date of the injury. And if you don't, you cannot later file a lawsuit. So doesn't mean that this person is in fact going to file a lawsuit, is just giving an indication that there is some injury.
Okay, so do you think this woman has a strong case, though?
You know, again, I have to throw out the caveat. I don't know the facts as well. I don't, but I'm really surprised that, you know, the notice of claim was even filed in this situation.
Okay.
You know, this is, I think what they're likely arguing, without seeing the benefit, I know it's flashing up there on the screen, without seeing the benefit of the notice of claim, they're likely arguing that this is some kind of a dangerous work environment.
Right.
That, you know, and DCS,
Not enough security.
DCS was aware of it. And so we'll have to see. I mean, we'll have to see if, in fact, you know, DCS decides to settle this via the notice of claim, or if they ultimately say, hey, file your lawsuit, and we feel confident that we don't have these issues. I think given some of the information that DCS has put out prior and around the time of this incident, I don't expect that we're going to see a settlement here.
I thought it was really interesting here that the attorney's background, she was a social worker and a former DCS employee. Do you think her background helps this case?
You know, it could. It gives a little insight.
Right,
in
because
terms
she
of government.
understands, right?
Right. You know, a lot of attorneys, myself included, worked, you know, for the government when we first started our careers, and it gives you a little insight in terms of the court, in terms of how things work. And no different here. It might give her a little insight in terms of DCS.
All right, well, we will definitely wait to hear what DCS has to say. Hector, great having you as always. Thank you so much.